Hi everybody. Keep note that what we're doing in some of these early modules of this course of moral aspects of medicine is laying some foundations, both intellectual ones and philosophical ones and linguistic ones even in the way that we're considering words. All of this material that we're doing I see as a way of giving us certain kinds of analytical tools and intellectual tools so that when we start talking about specific issues in bioethics, we have a number of different viewpoints that we can sort of throw around to each other and make determinations about as we're doing it. So just keep that in mind as we continue in some of these early modules. They're important because hopefully in our discussions we'll be able to continue going back to the ideas and the concepts that we've talked about now. The purpose of this module is having considered in light of theological anthropology some of the big issues about what it means to be a human being. Now we turn to the specific human experience of health and illness and what that means in terms of being a human being. And the things that you'll read for this module are mainly literary, one poem, one short story, philosophical essay. And hopefully by reading them and considering some of the characters and some of the other issues that arise, we'll have a bit more sympathy or compassion, I guess, for those who are ill and even for ourselves when we are ill. I want to just in this short video get some terminology and specific vocabulary out on the table for us so that we all have a basic idea of what these readings are going to be talking about and also what will be useful for us as we continue to explore some of the philosophical foundations of medical ethics. First, the word enigma comes up in one of the readings that we'll be doing for this module. An enigma is a very large, difficult intellectual problem that cannot easily be solved. When we use the word enigma to describe a situation that somebody's in or some kind of intellectual construct that we're trying to figure out, it tends to be a rather pessimistic way of referring to something. It refers to something that presents itself to us as a problem and as a very daunting and threatening kind of thing. On the other hand, a word that we sometimes use when we're talking about something similar is the word mystery. And mystery is a word that's often used in theological and religious contexts to talk about God or the human experience of God. Now, a mystery is also something which, in a sense, is not easy to understand or something that may be requiring of a lot of human effort to get into. But a mystery, when used in theology or when used in the way that we'll be using it in this course, a mystery is something that is partly understandable, but partly what we call intelligible, partly apprehendable by the human mind and by human experience, and yet never totally and absolutely intelligible or apprehendable or understandable by human experience. When we talk about a mystery, we're talking about something that in a sense grabs us or grips us as being important, that we are attracted to or attracted by, and yet humbly acknowledging that we'll never quite get to the bottom of it, we still have the ability or the interest in moving into it. Think, for example, how very often deep or personal human relationships are mysterious or present themselves to us as a mystery. When you're in love with somebody, or you have a child, or you have a responsibility for somebody else for whom you deeply care, you can describe in some ways why it is you feel attracted to the person, or why it is you love the person, or why you spend time with the person. And certainly other people would be able to understand that. But you probably, even if given a lot of time, could not totally and absolutely explain why it is you're in love with the person, or feel attracted to the person, or want to be with the person. In a sense, a human relationship is a mystery. In quite the same way, human health and human illness is a mystery. It's something that we can talk about, can understand to a certain level, but will never quite get to the bottom of. So that's an important distinction to keep in mind, the distinction between an enigma, which will come up in a reading that we'll be using for this module, and a mystery. We also want to talk in terms of the manifestation of human health and illness, and how human health and illness is very often demonstrated and talked about in terms of physical signs and symptoms. A sign, used as a concept in medical science, is some kind of observable and measurable fact of human biological existence. So, for example, somebody's temperature could be referred to as a sign. A patient's heart rate can be referred to as a sign. A patient's blood pressure can be referred to as a sign. These are all manifestations of some kind of physical existence that are measurable and quantifiable and trackable, as it were, signs. Symptoms, on the other hand, are the way in which a human person, a human agent, a patient in a medical setting experiences the signs of illness or health or many other things besides. So sometimes we refer to certain symptoms like, oh, I feel sweaty, or I feel lightheaded, or I'm demonstrating the symptom of fatigue or tiredness. Those kinds of things are more difficult to quantify or to measure, and yet they're very important because they relate more to the subjective experience of the person, of the patient, in dealing with their health or their illness. Signs and symptoms will be spoken of very specifically by medical practitioners and will be referred to in medical studies and journals because they are ways of talking about this experience of health and illness, whereas signs are a bit more objective and symptoms tend to be a bit more subjective. Finally, we get into the distinction between pain and suffering. I tend to use as a quick definition of pain any kind of disturbing or unpleasant sensation or experience that a person undergoes. Pain is very unpleasant, and again, it tends to be described as a symptom of somebody's illness. Suffering, on the other hand, is when somebody subjectively begins to interpret the pain or the unpleasantness that they're experiencing. They begin to interpret their pain as threatening to their being. For example, it's very possible to be undergoing a tremendous amount of pain, that is physical or emotional discomfort, and yet not to be suffering, because somebody may be undergoing pain, physical unpleasantness, but not subjectively or psychologically or emotionally or spiritually interpreting it as threatening to their being or threatening to their well-being. So we even, in medical science and in medical ethics, have a distinction there between pain and suffering. Now, just keep those terms and some of that vocabulary rolling around in your head, and it will, along with some of the other things we do in these opening modules, provide some of the foundation of our discussions as we move ahead. So enjoy the reading of a short story, a poem, and a philosophical essay for this module, and I look forward to our discussion of this on the discussion board. Take care, and see you next time.